So thank you everyone for showing up tonight, and welcome to the Humanist Youth Leadership Panel, a survey and skills building workshop, which is being held as part of the American Ethical Union's 106th Assembly. Today, we hope to provide some insight into the age-old question: how do we maintain and attract young people to ethical societies? My name is Julstrom-Agoyo, and I'll be moderating today. I grew up attending ethical culture, I grew up in ethical culture, attending ethical societies. I am the Future of Ethical Societies, or FES liaison to the AU board. FES, for those of you who don't know, is a US-based group of young humanists. Many of us grew up attending ethical societies, and some of us got connected later on, and a few of us are part of the panel today. I will be letting our panelists introduce themselves so that we can get into the heart of our discussion. Javen, Clark, do you mind going first?
Sure. Okay. My name's Evan. I'm the executive director of Atheists United in Los Angeles. We're a community group that's been around since 1982 and is having all the conversations we're going to be engaging today. Also on the board of directors of the Secular Student Alliance. I'm on my last term there, and I guess I'm still their board chair, but I'm excited to get out of the way finally. So lots of good things to talk about. Excited to be here.
Thanks so much. Javen Lev, can you go next?
Yeah, sure. My name is Javen Lev. I'm from the Philippines. I'm currently the Young Humanist International Coordinator and also the social media consultant of Humanist International. But at the same time, also here in my country, I am the chief executive of Humanist Alliance Philippines International. So I'm very much happy to be here, and yeah, excited how this conversation is going to be then. Thank you.
Thanks, Javen. We're happy to have you here too. Anya Overmann?
I'm muted. There we go. Hi, everybody. I'm Anya Overmann. I grew up attending the Ethical Society in St. Louis. Now I'm a digital nomad wandering around. And I'm currently in LA. I'm the president of Young Humanists International, and I'm affiliated with the American Ethical Union as their representative to Humanists International. And I'm very excited to have this panel. We have some really great panelists today.
Thanks, Anya. And Debbie Goddard?
Hi, I'm really excited to be part of this too. I feel like I'm a sneaky older person though, that got onto a young person panel because I'm 41. But I got involved with the humanist community when I was 20 as a college student. And a lot of the work I've done over the years has been with college students and campus and community groups as well. I worked at the Center for Inquiry in Amherst, New York for 12 years. And more recently, the last 2.5 years, I've been at American Atheists as the vice president for programs.
Thanks so much, Debbie. And last but not least, Jay Hooper.
Hi, everyone. I am Jay Hooper. I am clergy at large, also known as the ethical evangelist, kind of going here, there, and nowhere at the same time, making things happen, making things change as much as possible. So that's kind of my deal. I'm also the NLC officer, which is the National Leaders Council, and glad to be here with all of you, sharing your wonderful space, and at the same time, sharing your vision for something new and fresh.
Thanks so much, Jay. So we have 5 amazing panelists with us today. We expect some riveting conversations. We do have some questions that we'll be asking, but we are open to questions from the audience. So as we're going through the discussion, please feel free to enter any questions that you have into the chat box, and we'll try to get to them. How did you get into humanism, and specifically leadership in humanism, and why do you stay? And I will just call on names if no one jumps in.
Everyone's so bashful.
We'll go backwards. Yeah. So you introduced me first. Now you gotta do Jay first.
Yeah. Jay wants to go first.
All right. I think
Oh,
Jay
okay.
has-
I'm sorry.
Thanks,
Let's
Jay.
go. I was trying to make sure I was together first. All right. So I'm sorry. Repeat the question.
Yes, could you repeat that, please, slowly?
Yes.
I couldn't understand it again.
Okay, so sorry. How did you get into humanism and specifically leadership in humanism, and why do you stay?
I blame it all on my dogs. I was walking, literally no lie, I was walking and I actually ran into the Ethical Society in Riverdale, Yonkers. Probably not the way that most people would think about humanism. It wasn't like I typed in, church without God or anything. I just actually was fascinated by the building. It kind of reminded me of something from Frank Lloyd Wright. And that's my love for art. But in the end, I thought it was fascinating. I did. I found it very fascinating. I was at an info session and really enjoyed what was being talked about. Came back, after being kind of sought after by Liz Collier. She just really, it was her hospitality. It was her welcoming. It was her openness. And it was there that I kind of found my niche, and I found that sense of there was not only just a like-mindedness, there was a like-heartedness that I was seeking to connect to. And what has kept me here, even, has been the need to work on the heart of the matter and the heart of the movement. I find myself to be the one who is always constantly seeking the movement in a way where we operate in an embodied practice, and in a way that also embodiment brings in frameworks of feelings, and not just feelings in the sense of emotion, but also in many ways feelings that allow for us to honor each other within a sense of compassion, not just rooted in service, but actually in the actions of love being an action in itself.
Thank you so much, Jay. I would love to hear from at least one other person on this panel on this question, perhaps someone that did not grow up attending ethical societies.
I went to Catholic school.
Tell us about that.
So my story is a little more atheisty in that I attended Catholic school in Philadelphia because public schools are challenged. My father was Jewish, though, so I had questions and ended up an atheist in 6th grade around the time of confirmation. Ended up getting a scholarship to a Catholic high school. Lost my scholarship because of a philosophy club I started and some papers I wrote in religion class. Got a little angry about things. Started another philosophy club in my second public high school. Someone from that club invited me to a Center for Inquiry Student Leadership Conference when we were both in college. I was like, the what now, who? She's like, secular humanism. I was like, what? What is this? She said, it's basically a student atheist convention. And I was like, what? That's a thing? Was introduced to a lot of things. And I said, when I get back to Philly, I'm going to start a group. And they're like, there are already 5 or 6 groups in Philadelphia. And I was like, what? So I joined them all. And stayed really involved. I think the motivating factor, besides the fact that I just met like interesting, smart, like people I liked hanging out with who were thinkers about the world. I was a philosophy student, so a lot of the kinds of conversations we had were things I liked to talk about. And I stayed because I really thought it was foundational to change things. I was interested in LGBTQ equality, women's issues, fighting racism and things. And on a good number of the issues I was interested in, the social justice issues. A problem, sort of institutional structural problem that we faced was like what people were getting from their pastors, from their religious beliefs, what they said they were getting from the Bible. And so I thought if I worked in a community that challenged some of those beliefs, that we wouldn't have some of the issues. I was not right. Just want to point out, I've learned more since being 20 about like how these things work, and they weren't as simple as I thought. but I stayed involved and again, kept meeting great people and really thought it was like some of the tools that parts of this community promote and the humanist values that people embody, I still believe firmly are foundational to a kind of change that I want to see. So some of it's activism and some of it's meeting cool people.
Thank you. I would love to hear from Javen. I saw you nodding your head a lot while Debbie was speaking.
Yeah, so for me, actually just gotten involved with humanism quite recently. I mean, through the humanism movement, I got involved just very recently around 2018, I think. But I do consider myself a humanist even before then for about 10 years or so. I'm actually a member of the Latter-day Saints or Mormons before. And my church, everyone was pretty much active. You know, we go to Sunday church every day for 4 hours spent there. I even had a time to, because we usually pray for the sacrament, and that was actually one of my responsibilities as a priesthood holder, if you would say. But it was only around high school when I started questioning. I was part of a journalist publication. So as a journalist myself, you know, I've gotten quite curious about a lot of things. You get to question a lot of stuff. And one thing led to another. I was experimenting with my faith, and yeah, I turned into atheism. um, but before, you know, before being an atheist, I was already involved with a lot of community work. So the transition process was relatively fast, around happened about a year, because I was already doing some work. I never thought of it as like doing it for rewards or for fear of consequences. I was already doing it for just the sake of doing it because it's right. So yeah, I was involved with a lot of movement, particularly environmental journalism, where I have been hiking mountains, talking to indigenous people who have gotten their lands grabbed by larger corporations, and also fishermen as well. Um, and you know, you get to understand like different stories about different people, and sometimes it pushes you and drives you to really work hard on it. And by the time when I moved to a different city, I was studying again in a university, and this one time in my English class, I remember. I don't remember though what was the reason why my teacher asked me this, but he asked me if what was my religion or my affiliation, and I told him that I'm not part of any denominations. I had to say it that way because just saying frankly, atheist or atheism, you know, it gets a lot of stigma, particularly here in the Philippines, where a lot of people are still quite religious. So I just want to say it nicely that I'm not part of any denominations. And one of my classmates actually heard me say that, and they thought it was a good idea that they add me to their atheist Facebook chat on Messenger. And then yeah, we just thought that we wanted to create an organization, so we're looking up some atheist organizations in the Philippines, and one of which was Humanist Alliance Philippines International. So I got really curious as well, like what is humanism and what's that about? So, you know, doing more background research on humanism, I found out that wow, it's actually the things that I have been doing already. I just haven't really known that there's actually a word for it. So I was really quite surprised and happy. So I was made their chapter leader for Dumaguete City, the city where I'm currently at. And yeah, you know, one thing led to another. I was also the happy youth head after following months, and then next their chief executive for relatively 2 years span of time. So it has been doing great. One thing that really hooked me with this movement is, you know, the people that I've been friends with were actually just drinking buddies at first, but well, you know, once we've formed ourselves this kind of community, you know, you get to see the transformation within other people as well, you know, the development once they consider themselves as humanists. So aside from drinking on weekends, we now spend our time doing community work, doing talks in universities, doing environmental work as well, and participating in other civil groups. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I think a lot of what you said will resonate with our viewers. Unless someone else wants to comment on this question, we could go to the next one. Okay. So this is a question I'm sure a lot of our viewers tuned in to find out. Why do and we'll talk about the how later, but why do organizations struggle to attract young people? Would love to get probably all of your takes on this.
I had a small comment that I think others here will be able to bounce off of, and Javen, you reminded me of this. I learned about the Philadelphia Ethical Society by walking past the building and then being like, wait, what? In Rittenhouse Square, and then, what's this? And then picking up brochures and then showing up for something one evening. But I was intentionally looking for groups after going to a student leadership conference, and I had no idea what the demographics were of this community, except for this student conference I attended. And I was kind of surprised later to find that that was an unusual group. But as I joined different local communities, it was people were really excited to see me as a 20-year-old showing up for different meetings, and I don't think some of the members and leaders knew how to be welcoming, but they really wanted me to stay, and they really wanted me to be involved, and they were so excited to see me there. And I was kind of like, hello, come in. What can welcome? Can you come back next week? You know, it was a very strange kind of environment, and not all of the groups were a good culture fit. And I ended up not attending some of them because either they were boring or really early meetings on Sundays, and I just wasn't into waking up that early. And I couldn't be that involved with all of them, but I feel like part of it is when you don't have young people, it's hard to get young people. When you don't have events and things that are relevant to younger people, what do you have to offer? A lot of the times it's, you know, we hope we find younger people who want to do exactly what the group is already doing, which may not be so relevant. But I was invited into some spaces where I could help shape the group's activities and outreach to help attract other people, like organizing campus events. And so that was a way that I got sucked in real early, was I think being provided with some space and opportunities to help the group be better at outreach and involvement, and shifting the culture to be relevant to different people.
Yeah, I'd love to riff off that. I mean, this question in general, I feel like it's a bigger question, which is just how do you attract any group of people, especially those that don't fit the predominant identity? I mean, to me, there's varying types of people that you want to attract. So there's people like Debbie and myself who like self-selected into this before anyone asked us or showed us materials. Like the fact you described seeing a building and then walked in yourself, you are the hyper curious 5% that is like always going to be coming in and out of our groups. What I find the harder question is how to keep those people in your group. And then the second part is how we get to this massive 95% of people or whatever demographics, right? Or 10% that actually might listen to us, how we get those people to even know we exist and then have something worth a damn if they do try us out. And I continually find that most groups are not looking to be relevant to everyone's life and experience. Whatever the predominant identity is. So every group I've been in has been on average, right? Like 20 or 30 years older than me. Like I still have another 20 or 30 years before I hit the average age in the group I run right now. And I mean, I'm in my 30s now, still giving talks about like what young people want. I mean, Debbie's in a panel still giving these talks, and I'm sure like there's a bit of like, we don't belong here anymore. Like we've talked with and worked with 16-year-olds who like think we're the oldest people they've ever met.
Not in this community, though.
But it's not.
We're young here.
And we don't have to always think about this as a like uniquely humanist problem. Like this is a culture problem you see kind of in all types of group. We see this in Protestant religions right now. We see this in like political parties in some parts of the world. Like what I really do think though, whether you're going to use like capitalist corporate speak, which is like, how do you sell your products effectively to people for them to pay attention, or you use more like humanist language, which is like, how do we give experiences and transformations that will actually connect with people? We have to be asking, I think, a much deeper question about like, what do people actually need and want? And then how do we address that need and want? And I find that most of our programming hasn't evolved much in 30 years. I mean, it's now been, I'm coming up on 15 years I've been involved in like movement, atheist humanist work, and I'm still having the same conversations I have. And my organization is, founded in 1982, was a chapter of American Atheists in like 1977 or something. And I'm doing a project right now where I'm scanning all of their old files and documents. It's awesome. We're finally digitizing all this stuff. And I found that was in 1995. So it's like, we're coming up on 25 years ago, a debate on the board about if a program was atheist or not. And like, it's the same conversation about, is something humanist or not? Is it like whether we can critique a Richard Dawkins for losing the Humanist Award, or whether like we're having the same conversations, I think, because we've been stuck talking about only the experiences of a subgroup of people, which is often very white, very old, very academically achieving. Yeah. And then we also have programming that like is refusing to fully head on address the experiences and the needs. And the need part is more critical, I think, even than just like the ideas. We're really good in these like free thought style communities of talking with the front of our brains, the prefrontal cortex going, oh, I can philosophize, but actually like helping me raise a kid, helping me find a job, helping me meet someone I could date, helping me, those are actually the experiences that need to be addressed for most young people. We still have intellectual needs. We're still going to come to your speakers. We're still going to do all these other things. But until we have those programs, similar to parents, right? Like if you don't have children's programs, how do you expect to keep parents in your group? We all know this. We've all been talking about this since the founding of any group ever, secular, not secular. Well, the same thing goes for young people and student loan debt and the housing crisis right now, and like the loneliness of our poorly designed cities. So I mean, we can get more into depth of these different things, but I'm trying to figure out how we do more relevant things for those people. And my first piece of advice, which we'll get into in the next question, is like, we don't have to do everything together. I know that sounds uncomfortable as humanists, that like we're supposed to almost like shed everything and all be humanists together. But if you look at almost every organizational structure across the world that is successful, they break up into subgroups. They almost always go down into smaller groups to succeed. And like, I really don't think my 90-year-old grandmother wants to play beach volleyball with my friends, and I don't want to play bingo with her friends. And that's not a character flaw of either of us. It's a like experiences that actually bring us joy. So let's give those people the experiences that bring them joy. And sometimes that's going to be in segregated groups, in a less dangerous form of the word segregated.
I have something to say off of that. So something that you've kind of repeated a couple times, Evan, is about being together and community and being able to support one another through life. And being someone that grew up in the ethical humanist movement, I've been afforded that in a really special way. And I've found that the thing that keeps pulling me back is the people that I've known forever. Like Julia and I have known each other since we were like 14, and we were gossiping about boys in middle school. And I reached out to Christian just, I don't know, a couple months ago when I was going through a rough time, and he helped talk me through it. I vented to Javen a couple months ago about the Richard Dawkins thing, a very long vent. So, there's these people that we form relationships with, and it's really more compelling to be involved and develop these, what I'd call special interest groups, which, by the way, the Ethical Society of St. Louis does really well in catering to these subgroups and allowing them to flourish and letting people have these interests and fostering them, because that's what gets people to stick around and support them through, whatever they go through, is by finding shared activities to bond over. So, you know, when I was 14 and that was gossiping about boys, Julia and I bonded over that. And here we are, 15 years later, still good friends that will still do that. So, so I think it's really about building those environments where people feel comfortable because there's something they want to do and they can sit down and do it with somebody else. And it's not just about humanism. It's not just about atheism. It's about doing shared activities that create more meaning in our everyday lives. So that's kind of my take on that question.
I think yeah, I want to riff off of that a bit too, and I think there's so much that Evan you've said, Anya you've said, and I hold all of that, and I when I sit with this question, you know, one of the things that I wrestle with most is kind of like this idea of like, when I've, you know, in my quick snippet of my story, I'll be honest, it was boring as hell. I was bored out of my mind. I have been in many places in societies where I am bored. And I think in many ways that's very tough for people, because when we think about what boredom is, I think everybody has a different take on it, just respectfully, right? So if you're not moving and you're not driving, I'm really gonna be like, okay, like great, I'm in another classroom. I sit in the academy all the time. I listen to people lecture. I know what that feels like. And you're not telling me nothing that I'm not actually getting in debt for. Thanks, I've got $425,000 worth of debt. Anybody want to pay it? Okay. So, right. And in addition to that, right, I think there's another component where, and it's not abstract. I think there's much of our humanism has to develop some kind of sexiness. It's just got to be fly. Like you gotta, I don't care if you are 70. Look, my dad was 70 and was a fly brother. Always had some swag or something. And I wanted to be like, I literally had no problem hanging around my own father. So I know a lot of y'all got swag and y'all left it behind somewhere in them hippie days, right? And so you got to bring that back out. You got to bring that free loving stuff. You got to want to be able to talk what young people talk about. You want to talk, look, they want to, let's be real. We ain't trying to just have no conversation about no relationship and who you want to be with. We want to talk about, are you having sex? Okay, how is that going? Okay, are you having a healthy sex life? Baby, make sure you wrap it up because you don't want to bring nothing home, right? We need to have these kind of conversations. I know it might seem very elaborate and I might sound very charismatic, but two, there is that. You need charisma. You've got to have some palate, right? And so there's a way to deliver information with inspiration, right? And I think in many ways, many humanists have to embrace their aliveness, the very thing that makes them in many ways spark. And that is within that intellectual quality, right? And being able to engage the intelligibility that we have together, but also remember that, right, it's that ignitement of intelligence that we are dealing with, right? That in many ways, when you share your enthusiasm with me, I have the courageousness to share in the enthusiasm with you. So, right, I do agree with Evan. I'm just going to probably rearrange some of his language for my sake, because I don't see it as segregation when we're dealing with having a moment in which we are having our own particular groups where we feel like we are growing in a sense of belonging. I think we have to push against segregation with congregation. And that is just an antonym for basically meaning, look, I want to come together because I not only belong here, but I'm becoming here. I'm growing here. I want to actually evolve here. And that is a big part of who we are as a humanist community. When I don't feel like I can grow, and I don't feel like I can grow where I actually think I belong, I'm a love-matic person, okay? I'm a love-matic person. That means I'm very nomadic. You see me go everywhere, but I really go where the love is, right? So if you want to find me, if you want to know where I need to be right now, I'm downstairs in a basement in Susquehanna Valley with some people who love me and care about me, have shown hospitality towards me. And in many ways at the same time, right, It ain't a cultural thing. I'm the only Black little speck out here in the middle of the goddamn woods. And I'm holding it down, and we having some good old times, and we listen to some Michael Jackson, and we listen to some hip hop, and we talking about, look, we talking about Civil War. We didn't talk about the Civil War rifles in the corner in the back room, and then we didn't talk to, I don't hold no gun, but now I want to go gun training. Come on, y'all. Like, it's not that hard. But if you love what you do, if you love what you do and you share your passion and you reinforce it with a need to share, and I think that's something that I think we as humanists are very individualistic, but we're not personable. And we struggle because we don't want nobody to be in our personal space, especially some of us who have gotten so dignified over the years and ended up with nice little corporate jobs and retired. We didn't got so, you know, purse happy and all tight. We got to loosen up some. We don't know how to just engage because we don't want anybody in our personal space. And I think we have to ask the question, are we willing, in many of the spaces that I like to work with, I'll tell you, are they willing to be vulnerable, right? Courageous, and at the same time, ready to be embarrassed, because that's what happens in vulnerability, right? You're gonna be embarrassed and you're gonna be courageous. A lot of us like to be comfortable. We wanna be available. Here's my time, here is my space, right? We gotta push on that a little bit. And I don't, and honestly, I have not seen that within a lot of the places that I would love to go to. So I'm interested in many ways removing a lot of the gatekeepers that I see. I see a lot of gatekeepers, you know, and I think we have to be very careful because some folk don't even realize that they're gatekeepers and they think that they're open. And we have to call out gatekeepers. Look, they're gatekeepers on this call. And I love them dearly, and I'm glad they're here so that we can really begin to think, I'm giving you keys, so trust me, when I come with my key, we're gonna unlock this door together, hopefully.
Hollow place on the floor.
Oh, I was like, what's that?
What's his name?
Jay, there was a question from Christian. What was the phrase you used? Enthusiasm is humanism's mysticism?
That is, yes, that is it. That's the mysticism. If we got, look, if everybody else got some kind of fancy form of mysticism, if Christians got Pentecost, the Jewish got the Kabbalah, and look, and if you're Hindu and you practice your Shaktipat, look, we can go all forms of mysticism, but humanism has, the enthusiasm is our mysticism. We have to engage it. We have to ignite it. It is essential because it really allows for us to engage on a relationship that brings us excitement. I want to get excited about you. I want you to be excited about me. Dr. King's mentor, Reverend Howard Thurman said, you know, I want to be me without making it uncomfortable for you to be you. How do we do that? If my humanism looks a little different, look, I'm fine with being a humanist heretic. I'm already a heretic in other spaces, right? So in many ways, let's push on that envelope and let's turn this thing into a spectrum, you know, a kaleidoscope of humanism that brings in other forms. Maybe it's got some tarot cards in there. You don't know, or you ain't never done no tarot cards before, but you need to do it because at this point, Sister Girl needs a little bit of a vision to know how to engage with some kind of relational issues that's going on in the world. Maybe it is science. Maybe you need to go ahead and think about talking about, you know, Bill Nye the Science Guy and whoever else you need to listen to. But like in the laws of attraction, I don't care how you enter humanism. Just come and be open to people's courageous mode of meaning, because they're trying to make meaning out of this life too. Let me shut up because I know we got a lot of things and questions to ask. I know, you know, but yeah, let's do this work because I'm tired of the struggle. I don't even want to talk about struggling institutions.
That, I mean, in a lot of ways, I think actually that last line, the struggling institutions, like I feel like I've answered this question for 10 years about how do we attract young people. And I feel like I'm going to be asked this question for another 10 years. And what I've always done is create my own organizations or try to take over and seize the ones that exist. To be frank, like, because the reform is not going to just magically happen with everyone saying, I don't want to change anything we do. I just want magically the small things Like, we want a bunch of young people, but we don't want to change our programming. We don't want to change our branding. We don't want to change our language. Like, what do you think is the problem you've had for the past 30 years? And this isn't unique. Like, the political parties have this, churches have this, every group in the
College
world
has it.
has it. Yeah, this is a human problem in organizations. You have to make change and innovation part of you. I don't understand how you can have a humanism that doesn't prioritize innovation. Like, status quo bias, or whatever language you want to put with it, is usually inherently anti-humanist. And I think we have to embrace that further. And yeah, that means we're going to get really uncomfortable. Jay used the word vulnerable, which I imagine and I hope all of you love. And that means you might have to create your own group if this one isn't working for you. And these are the things you deal with. But this idea that things can't change because I'm comfortable is why we're not attracting certain groups.
Yeah. It's like we talk about it, but there's not a commitment to changing things when we realize that that means that our group is going to be different. If we want different people to participate, the group is going to have to be different as well. It's going to change. It's part of what diversity and inclusion is about. Like, your group's going to be different, right? I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
Like, intersectionally, I feel like I moved to New Jersey 2.5 years ago, and I'm still looking for my place here. And I was thinking too, as we were talking, like, when I joined all the groups in Philly, there are two that I dropped out of participating in: the Ethical Society and the AHA chapter. Both met on Sunday mornings. That's not my time, yo. that's not when I want to be driving an hour to get to something to do, for 10:30 or 11 o'clock. It was lecture based, and then like sort of cookies maybe, or like everyone just left afterwards. The ones that had like evening meetings, people went out to eat afterwards, like a Saturday discussion, people went out for drinks and sandwiches afterwards. Those are the ones that I stuck with. And I know like a lot of these groups have changed over time. I moved to Westfield, New Jersey. It's a wealthy town. I'm not a wealthy person from a wealthy background. I'm having some issues with that. There's some class difference. It's very white. I looked out of my zone for different groups to join. I saw an NAACP chapter 20 minutes away, went to that. It was 8 people in their 70s. It was MLK weekend. And when I came in 20 minutes late, actually, they were like, we were just talking about where we were when we heard that Martin Luther King was shot, going around in a circle. So 8 people, and then they went to me, and I was like, I wasn't born yet. And they're like, what? It's like, I hope I don't look that old. No, I wasn't born yet. I was minus 12 at that point or something. So, that's fine. That's a good chapter for them, but it wasn't very vibrant or lively to me, and I didn't go back to another meeting. When I think about I went to the Essex County Ethical Society, which is about 25 minutes from me, and a Sunday morning meeting. So that was a little hard for me because I like to stay up late on Saturday nights. It was friendly. I met great people. I haven't been motivated to go back. And I've been thinking recently, as we're starting to have in-person events again during this pandemic, like what would I be excited about to see there? What would be vibrant? What would attract me? Places to hang out, like discussions rather than lectures. I like discussions. I like the chance to interact with people. A book club is like, okay, it's a topic-based discussion, but like getting the chance to like know more about who someone is that you're interacting with is something that I really like. So if that means people are going out afterwards to lunch in small groups, they're having these great conversations, I really get to understand people, but also feel like I'm better understood by someone, that I can share myself, and like they're sharing themselves with me instead of like sitting and being presented to. I'd be more excited about that and participating in that kind of space. And so I've been thinking like, I should reach out to them, and maybe we can like get some event going when, people are more committed to getting together in person. Maybe I can help build the kinds of things that I would like to participate in more. That would get me excited. That probably wouldn't be on Sunday mornings too, just maybe Sunday afternoon, stuff like that. But I think about that, like the sharing, the community, meme references. I like those sometimes. Law speak sometimes. That's a little out of date now, but there's a set of like cultural references. Getting together with people from different backgrounds has always been important to me. And these are things that I see missing from some of our local communities in humanism. And those are the communities that I tend to be less interested in being a part of. The ones that are really gatekeepy, the ones that are closed-minded, the ones that aren't excited about the different ways that we can be human, the ones that don't have any activist component, the ones that don't pay attention to the community around them. They pay attention to their narrow group. So here in Westfield, New Jersey, I'm not used to New Jersey being small municipalities. So there's an activist group locally. And after 2020, they're like, what do we do now? And I was like, Newark has lead in their water. That's 20 minutes away. How about we do something? And they're like, oh, but that's like 4 towns from here. Oh, so far, 20 minutes away. These are your neighbors, When I think about the things that humanists and progressives and liberals and people who are interested in certain kinds of change for a better society could be engaged in, and who we could be serving, a lot of that does involve things like inclusion and diversity and paying attention to the different experiences that people have, the different ways that we live, the different challenges we face. And sometimes, we read the books, but we don't have that in our worlds. And then we don't speak to that in our actions and our groups. I'll stop there.
I know we have more questions, but I really think sometimes this comes down to leadership, and it literally just the people, and I think Jay had the perfect word, enthusiasm that they bring to the position. I mean, we can connect with people of all different ages. I remember when I was 21 and I walked into a free thought group and they were still talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And okay, I know I can't connect with them on the issues they're passionate about or want to sit around and talk about, but I didn't feel welcome when I brought my curiosity. There wasn't people who were excited to embrace new people, who wanted to help me build and create and find my platform. I was just student body president at my university. I should be their dream traditional experience coming into a group to take over. And I remember it was just kind of patting me on the head, oh, well, in 5 to 10 years, you might be ready. And that's the gatekeeping we're talking about, right? If a new person has any ideas, as wild as they are, throw some money and time at them and go, how do I help? Even if you don't like the idea, kind of just say, how do I help? And that literally that leadership change from the I'm tired, we don't have time, we don't have money, I don't know how to solve your problem, to I don't know how to solve your problem, let me help you. That is the leadership difference I'm looking for, because there are people like Anya and Jay and myself who are coming out of colleges and universities and high schools and the streets all the time, who poke into our communities with questions, and we're just not met with the I think enthusiasm that could help us thrive. I had to literally found my own humanist group at 22 because I wouldn't have anyone that would work with me. And that shouldn't have been the way. I mean, the reason you can't attract me is I have to create my own for me to make it welcoming. That's the gatekeeper-isms we're talking about.
Let me throw down with you on that too.
And you can't, and maybe there's a deeper question, which is can you train yourself to do that? Maybe, but it might take you 20 years. It might be worth getting out of your own way and finding some new leaders, or, letting Jay take over your congregation or 5 congregations, I mean it though. I mean, there are some people who exude enthusiasm and have proven energy at different stages in their life. And sometimes you just gotta follow them. And I found I'm that person for a lot of other people. I didn't plan to be. I've always had to build my own communities. I know most of the people on this call probably are as well, but yeah, it's been hard. It's been hard for, I think, some of us that even identify more as the natural enthusiastic leader to find space. And we're the first people that should get space, and we're supposed to bring 100 people with us.
Come on.
So anyways,
right there.
I'll see the
I'm
floor.
sorry.
But and I know we have no money. I know we have we're shrinking. I know what the problems are in some of these groups, but like, that's not a good enough answer. Like, be curious with us on how to solve it. I can give you all the time and energy you have ever seen in the world. But yeah.
Plus, can I just say,
Yeah,
if
here
you
we go.
keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result, you're going insane, right? So, I mean, at some point, something's got to give, and new things have to be tried. And I think the energy is there. I mean, you can see that the people on this panel have been pushing for change for close to a decade, over a decade now. So over a decade for some of us. So I don't know. I think some of that is just kind of letting down your guard and kind of accepting, you know, maybe some new energy is scary and it might bring something that we don't like, and it could bring something bad. But if we don't allow some new energy to come in, then how can anything ever change? How can we attract more young people? How can we attract more
Anti-status quo.
diverse populations if we don't open up? So, and you know, when you look at the people that are already in the movement or have been in the movement for ages, you know, and that demographic doesn't change decade after decade, I mean, it's just, for us, I feel like it's a no-brainer. So this question, I mean, we just beat it to death because it's just, we're so tired of answering it, right? Like, we're so ready for solutions.
One of the worst things that I think that can be said to somebody young is when they're striving to make a difference, to bring change. The statement that often ends up tickling my ear and a few others that I probably know in this space is, well, you know, I went through the same thing you went through very similarly. So you're just gonna have to go through that until. I'm sorry. I come from ancestors that went through hell. You mean to tell me I gotta live like my ancestor who fought for my liberty? So I gotta go through hell while I'm in a movement that, because you went through the same hell? Hell no. We're not doing that. And we gotta fix ourselves to do that. We gotta fix ourselves to position ourselves correctly to be like, you know what? I paved the way for you to do that. And I'm gonna hold you in that space to make sure that I see you through. That's the work. That's the work. You might not have the results or the answers, but what you can do is put yourself in position for me to go through the process. And while I'm going through the process, help me and love me in that process. Guide me, not with no foolishness of I went through it too, so you gotta go through it. No, help me break free from what's been holding you captive so I can bring some other new folk with me. This is the heavy lifting that's required. And I think we get so to this thing of, oh, I went through it too. That's not an excuse either. What's not an excuse is, look, my mentor is on here, Randy, there he is, I see his face. Look, when I was under him for leadership training, it was very clear. I did not want a society. That was my statement. I did not want a society when I first started. I said, nah. Y'all can have those spaces. Because I knew what I was bringing, there was not enough infrastructure. So this is what I'm talking about with setting up things where things need to change. There was no infrastructure for me to even step in. And I'll be honest, even the few societies I've applied for ain't interested. Because I'm a wild child for them. I'm too different. I got a loud mouth and everything. It's all of that, whatever it makes it work for them. But in the end, you got a leader or someone who wants to lead who says, hey, I don't want a society because I can see what I'm gonna get myself into. And then when it's time to go to a society, there's no infrastructure for me to even come in. So where does the change begin? because there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between what we think community should be and how we think and how we want people to come into our club or our clique. Which one is this a community, a congregation, or is this a clique and a club? You let me know.
Tell us. It's okay. It's okay if you got a clique. We'll go do our own clique, whatever. We're community. Like I wish I knew that. Like from some groups early on. Yeah, it's okay to be that. You don't, and just know what you are. That's okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think like most organizations, not just humanist organizations, they need to put themselves in younger people's shoes because they're trying to make a one size fits for all, that what works for them during their time, they're trying to copy that. And, you know, they think that that would work as well with this kind of generation. But, you know, you have to be realistic that we're actually seeing a very huge generational gap nowadays. And as long as, you know, there's that gap that we fail to address, then we'll be continue to struggle in attracting young people. And, you know, we do not just get to decide as well that we're going to have more younger people. It actually takes a lot of work and commitment, and we have to make sure that once we actually wanted to have more younger people, that our organizations are ready, because, you know, this younger people who are also students, you know, they're busy with their lives. Why would they even want to, you know, be part of another organization, you know, spend time with them? So we have to put something out there that actually encourages them to join you. Especially here in the Philippines, it's very different. You know, almost all younger people here have organizations. I guess it's the one that Evan said that resonates as well with Filipinos is that if we're not comfortable with anything, we usually start our own organization. But the only difference is the youth organization doesn't have money. So that's why we still ended up joining bigger organizations too, if we really want to do things our way. But yeah, as long as we're not putting ourselves on the lenses of younger people, then we will fail to understand and actually want to, you know, we fail to attract more younger people to our organization.
Thank you so much. That conversation went exactly where it was supposed to go and covered a lot of our questions. So I wanted to move in a little bit more towards solutions and pose the question, which organizations are good examples of working with young people or even individuals?
I can speak for a second about the Secular Student Alliance and some of the shifts we've been seeing over the past 10 years that I've been involved. So basically, if you look at the non-theistic identity spectrum in the United States, and you look at a lot of our groups that existed in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, like we're feeling and identified as hyper marginalized religiously, as this, you know, our identity was so wrapped up in reactionism. And I think the atheist movement, which I'm going to separate from the humanist movement here, I think wasn't always the best influence on the community side, because it talked about it always in individualistic terms, and new atheism really drove us towards like almost like a libertarian free thought rather than a more like communitarian humanism. And what I see now, though, seeing the massive, unbelievable demographic changes in the past 30 years for religious identification, we're not necessarily seeing just this huge identification with atheism and humanism that maybe a lot of you think when you see 1 in 3 young people don't identify as religious. But what we are seeing is less of your religious or theistic identity being your core institution, and we're seeing the spreading out of non-theistic identities. And what I mean by that is growing up as a queer atheist in Kentucky is radically different than a student at Berkeley University in the UC system. And so when we have a secular student group in rural Kentucky and they're talking about their atheism, it's a conversation about safety and survival and about like religious oppression. And when you talk to students at UC Berkeley, it's about progress and all of the identities that come after theism. And I find a lot of our communities that have leadership that got involved in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s are still kind of hooked on a lot of the theism versus atheism debates. They're still caught in the religion versus non-religion conversations. I know ethical culture slightly less so than a lot of the groups that maybe Debbie and I work with, but still, this is kind of, I think, a problem because, I mean, I organize in Los Angeles now, and we have the full gambit here. I mean, we have ex-Jehovah's Witnesses to like people who are sixth generation atheists at UCLA, teaching at UCLA, that are like trying to make space in the same community. And they literally speak different languages. And I think language is something we have to talk about eventually, is that each generation of humanism and subgroups of humanism, the flavors of humanism, will use different language. We will wear different clothes. We will, like, I can't imagine the like 1960s humanism talking about this like radically genderqueer, non-identifying anything communities of today. I mean, even me, and I'm still very young and like saw this, like how much change we've had in 15 years to where my niece knows more about trans issues than most of my friends is unbelievable. Like she literally will speak a different language by the time she's joining community, if she was not theistic, than I do about humanism. And we have to embrace that, and we have to like let that run. So I mean, I'm in a community that was founded in 1982, and they're still talking about Gora's positive atheism from the 60s and 70s in India. And I've never, ever met atheist under 40 who knows what the hell that even is. And most of the atheists I talk to don't even talk about atheism. Right? They're, the ones that are fresh out of religion or something, yes, if they still have hard critique, but most of them are talking about like, well, actually, I'm identifying more as like a democratic socialist, or I'm identifying more with, my queer or racial identity. Like, we're moving in such a radically spread out spectrum of non-theism that I think it comes back to there's no one way to do humanism, and we have to get more excited about all of those different flavors. And that means offshoots. Like we used to fight in non-theistic communities whether our group should sing or not. Who cares? It's not an important question. It's, are people like served meaningful answers to the questions of life? Are there moments of trauma? Do they have people that will help them? Are we, when it comes to solving existential crises like climate change or perpetual war that I've had to deal with my entire life as an American, are you giving me relevant answers and paths to work on those? And I like what I like about humanism, what attracts me to it. It is one of the most radical traditions in like, and I know I have more of a like Western humanist tradition. Thank you, Jay, for introducing me to that language. But like even that has been radical for most of known civilization. And like, I want to constantly be on the cutting edge of what is kind of radical compassion and radical solutions to the problems of our time. And humanism at its best is always there. The problem is a lot of our communities, as they get institutionalized, which we still need to do because we need power in society, there comes a lot of like status quo and traditions that slow us down sometimes. And that has hurt young people's access to our communities at times. Because I think the community that would have attracted me, and I didn't have to find my own all of these years, like it still doesn't exist. I like, talking to Jay and Anya and Debbie and Javen, like these people are working on it, but we don't have the money and the buildings to do this from scratch. So I I don't know. There's not a great solution there, I guess, the more I think about it. But I do think there's a lot to be said for like this spectrum is widening, and that's an opportunity, not a loss for us. That means there's people that can serve the people being traumatized in Kentucky differently than the people who their identity is marching in Black Lives Matter in Berkeley. And like, if those communities come together, they might look and feel and talk two different languages, but we want to find ways for their values to connect. And I think that's what's cool about humanism. But it's okay for them to have different languages and wear different hats and go to different clubs. Yeah, okay.
I think one of the, I mean, heck, I mean, I don't see many organizations, and I think that's why I also thought about creating Keep Living. And so when I started Keep Living, on some of y'all know about that Facebook show, and it just kind of started very raw. You know, it was like, I'm not able to find, you know, a space for me. I can't find, you know, a congregational community for me. And, you know, I need to make that happen. And what ended up happening was I was inspired to, you know, create this platform where I didn't have to think about gatekeeping. I didn't have to think about any of that. And it was funny. I recently looked and with my communications team who works with me, and they were like, you know, you got 4,000 followers. And I was like, that's not what's on my Facebook. And they were like, no, that's what's being shared. And then it's getting out and it's making momentum. And I was like, oh. So every month, I was keeping up with the show, you know, and things like that. And the numbers increased, you know, and the tech world is so interesting because in many ways, like where I could rest deeply on, you know, a lot of the historical analysis of how humanism comes across. Like, I just wanted to talk to people about just real stuff. You know, and it was Randy who kind of, you know, one day in a car heading over to a retreat that was just like, you know, like, no, you want to be real. And I have always just wanted to be real. And for me, that's where kind of my humanism a little bit more so rests for me. It's like, I just want to be real. I want people to stop giving me yaya. Like I like that intellectual yaya, like that, you know, talk to me like, you know, let me tell you about this book and what it said. Like, I'm glad I got a doctoral degree. I don't need to talk to you like I have one. It's not my thing. And just if that makes me a humanist, then trust me, I will tuck my degree in my back pocket and be like, we good. Because it's not necessary, right? And I realize even out here in Susquehanna, where I'm a consultant, like, these are down home good people. It is not my job, as you brought up, Evan, to bring somebody into some deep, elitist, educational or intellectual language that doesn't hold a community. Like, that's not the makeup of this community. These are good home folk who are working hard in a state that's, you know, that can really swing red or blue. And you got to love some folk in the language that they understand and make sure that you can guide them through a series of questions to really get to the heart of the matter. I think we do a very good job with questions, but do we ask the questions that we want to hear the answers to, or do we ask the questions that reveal the heart of the person that we are trying to have relationship with? And I think that that's a very important thing when we think about that. And so Keep Living became that for me. And I can't tell you how many people will reach out to me and be like, I just want to talk to you about, you know, such as I saw your show and I was thinking about, I want to talk to you about queerness. I want to talk to you about, you know, my relationship. I want to talk to you about my job. I want to talk to you about being in ethical culture. And it goes everywhere. And then I'm not just having a conversation of, I'm just atheist, or I'm just non-theistic, or I'm just, No, I'm having an actual personal connection with people on a real compassionate and caring level. We've got to set up, I think in many ways, we've got to do a good job setting up our own institutions, as I've been doing around the framework of self-care, community care, and congregational care for those who are in, congregational settings. And I think that that's important because those are mechanisms that allow for us to tap in to the spaces where people are seeking belonging. That's one of my biggest things. And as a result, when we do that, we watch them evolve in their own becoming, right? Once again. So that's why when I created Keep Living, and I constantly keep promoting that work, and I'm glad to really get back to it in August, because it has really been helpful. A lot of people are jumping on me like, where is it at? Where is it at? We're missing you. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be back, but right now, that's been the only place that has allowed for me to really feel grounded, other than if I'm talking to these lovely folk on this wonderful platform today.
So I have a couple things to say about this question. I think that it's hard to find organizations that do this well because it's hard to do. And it's like Evan said before, it's not just a humanist problem, it's just a problem across the board. And attracting young people it's a pretty universal thing. It's a difficult thing to do. And it's not because young people aren't interested. Young people are desperate for connection and belonging. We are desperate to find our place. And you've heard the sentiment echoed many times on this panel today. We keep trying to find that place. All of us on this panel are trying to find that place. And we really kind of haven't. We're still searching. And that's why we keep pushing and trying to expand the spectrum and really seek the connections that we're looking for. And I think that's the thing that pulls us back in, is these connections, is that, when we're seeking these new spaces, it's the connections that make space for that. And that doesn't necessarily have to be its own thing. I find older ethical humanists that really support me and have supported me. Many of you are on this call now that supported me through my childhood even. And having those experiences and having people that I know are there for me it's huge. And a lot of young people don't have that and don't feel that they have that. They don't feel that if they get into a tough spot that they can go and talk to somebody trusted without feeling, I don't know, some sort of shame or judgment or some sort of pushback on them that triggers some sort of defense mechanism that then gets them all locked up and they don't want to share anymore, and then they don't feel like they belong. So I feel like there are certain community members where I feel more comfortable bringing my personal issues to than others. And that's the sort of energy that we're trying to expand upon, is this openness, this supportiveness. And I don't know that it needs to be really recreating the wheel in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it just comes back to this really like human connection thing where we're just trying to find people that get us, that understand, or at least try to understand. And I don't know that it needs to be that complicated, but we're the status quo we're working against, where this constant grinding and digging into these habits can be kind of hard to dig out of. But that's why these young people are here, telling everybody on this call that if we just keep giving way a little bit at a time, we'll be able to find these spots to be more vulnerable and allow young people in and bring this energy in. And I think some people might be surprised about how easy that can be when you just give a little bit. And I think my home society's done a pretty good job at opening up and saying, okay, let's see what we can do when we open up the space in this way and we allow this group to grow and flourish, and let's see what we do when we support this group, or let's see what happens instead of staying quiet on Black Lives Matter issues. We have a vigil every other Sunday, or however often it's happening. There's these different ways to explore And I think those efforts, while they might not attract young people initially, it sends a message to young people saying like, look, we're trying to get out of our shell and really expand what we're doing, and those acts can spark a connection. And you don't need 40 people attending. You need 5 really good people attending and committed to showing up, who will then connect with more people and bring those people in. So you're really looking more for quality connection than anything else. I think that's what what a lot of organizations struggle for is they're looking to grow, but they're thinking in terms of numbers and they're not thinking in terms of relationships. And that's super, super important for any group.
I mean, I could be wrong that maybe ethical culture's magically beating everyone else's numbers, but most groups I know, they have 20 and 30 and 40 somethings come to their groups all the time, but they never come back. Like, these people come for a meeting or two and they never come back. The problem is the conversion. It's the quality. It's not the quantity. Like, if you converted twice as many of those people, you probably wouldn't have a whole panel on this.
So we have a question from the audience, and the question might be the point of the answer, but if anyone was actually able to name an organization that was doing a good job of working with young people. And so what I'm hearing is kind of like ideas of what might be able to work, but that nothing has worked really well, or that we can't think of right now. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, yeah, so much to say on this. So there's like, we could look to some organizations that are doing maybe better or worse. You know, grab your democratic socialists or political movements like Black Lives Matter that are doing, like, I think, great subcrowds. They also have gatekeeper problems in different cases. But I actually think it's a bit more about the medium and the experience. Like, I don't know if you follow any YouTubers, you should, but every teen I know has YouTubers they like are desperately committed to. And if those YouTubers come to their city and throw a concert or something, they go to it, right? Like, think about our culture in general. Musicians have never had problem getting young people. They offer an experience that matches the needs and desires of what those people want at those times, right? Like, I mean, I almost want to flip this, right? Like, okay, if we really wanted retirement community people, right? Like, let's have some cover bands. I don't know. Like, we know that there are specific experiences that certain groups of people like and attract them. And like, we don't have to recreate that wheel all the time. We actually can just like ride along upside it. So I know most young people who are new to a city, like bars, they like hikes, they like vulnerable experiences, you know, or meeting new people. Like, networking events still are mostly young people in new cities. Beach volleyball meetups, you know, kayak trips are usually young people. Like, I don't think we have to recreate the wheel. I think the problem is we always try to start from like our theology, essentially. And most people don't choose community based on their theology. Like, they keep coming back, right? Like, yes, there's something about it where we're going to separate based on identity, right? I know we do, but even the people on this call, like, we're in the hyper 10% where we talk about this all the time, and we're going to write the books and give lectures on this stuff. Like, we're talking about our friends who think we're weird that we care so much about it, but they'll come to volleyball with us, and they will come to a concert with us, and they will meet us for a picnic in the park. You can easily do all of those. You currently do those. It's just you design them more for different demographics, right? Like, you have speaker events for people who really like hearing critiques of like intelligent design. Great. I've heard that before. It doesn't excite me much. I've noticed if you bring Black speakers, you get more Black attendees. Oh, wow, that's not magic. You know, like, you have more participation than experiences that match the identities and experiences that those people want to match. People are attracted to them. They look for them. They find them. And sure, we could look at technologies. Like, I haven't met a person under 25 that knows what the heck meetup.com is. And I definitely don't know anyone under 25 who thinks Facebook's a serious platform. So we're going to have to talk differently to them about like where and how we communicate with them. But overall, I just think it's experiences, right? Like I know that if I start hosting, I'm in LA, if I host beach volleyball events, I will start getting people who like beach volleyball. And like, that's not the retirement community. Maybe some, they're welcome. I want them there. But like, you know, it's not hard. It's really not hard when you start thinking about that. Just ask a young person what they're doing with their time. Who are they watching on YouTube? Who, like, what comedians do they follow? Okay, how do you link up with that? Easy.
Easy.
As for me, like as someone who has been working with young humanists all over the globe, there has been some similarities with humanist organizations. They do have their like symptoms of organizations that has been working well with their young members, and one of which is humanist organizations that are good with their young members usually have their own youth sections. Like they've created this platform, this avenue to hold, you know, certain communities within the organization. We do not say it as a separate entity from the parent organization, but rather it's just a department within inside the organization. And it's, you know, it is a community built off of young people leading themselves, because who else would know younger people better but young people themselves? So those are the things that part of the work that we do is we try to encourage humanist organizations to, if they do have the resources, and I understand that not everyone or not all organizations have that, to be committed and the resources to actually engage and create that platform for young humanists. But I would say that once we do create these youth sections and actually dedicate ourselves and stay committed, you know, we can see the development that stems from it. I've noticed that from UAR Giovanni, or their youth section from Italian Union, you know, they've been doing a lot of great things. There's also one from the Norwegian Humanist Youth. You know, these are all examples of humanist organizations that has been working well, because they have been creating this specific youth groups just for them, you know, this community. Because if you're part of the community, you know, it's usually the people that you relate to so well. And like what Anya said, you know, these are the people that you tend to connect to, because no matter what happens, like, you know, no matter how messy it gets with the parent organization, you know that there's still this community that holds you back. That, you know, that makes you stay within that organization. And yeah, if ever that, if any of humanist organizations are listening as well to this call, hopefully we start one day to create that. I understand that like for other Americas humanist organizations, they already have, like, most of their members are already younger people, so there's like no need for them to create that youth section for themselves. But if there's like a different age group within the entire organization and we do have the resources, I guess it would be the perfect time to actually create that youth section.
Yeah, I agree, and wanted to add on to that and lift up again some of what was just said. I had notes from earlier. When it comes to like solid, tangible solutions and actions we can take to make things different, I guess the number one thing that we're saying is kind of the cell model. Allow there to be different kinds of activities or groups within the whole that appeal to different kinds of people, or people with different experiences, backgrounds, and interests, challenges they face. That might be parents, that might be students, that might be youth. You know, when I worked at the Center for Inquiry, we had African Americans for Humanism, we had CFI on campus, we had branches in different locations. Some of them ran Girl Scout groups, some of them ran parenting groups with, you know, different kinds of success. Some of them had Bible studies as well, but they would have, again, the cell model. Rick, what the heck's his name? The guy who did Saddleback Church.
Warren.
Thank you. I was like, Rick Warren, Saddleback Church. They had 20,000 people come on a Sunday. But that's not the only thing that people went to. And that wasn't the greatest way to connect with people, to have the population of a town showing up in one facility on Sunday for a couple hours. No, it's because they had groups attracting, 4 to 8 people. That might be for divorced people in their 30s, or single such and so's, or hiking, single hiking women, or, Bible study for teenage boys, or whatever it was. Like, people would have these groups that they were very, very committed to, where it was their friends, what they showed up to, but the groups were part of the whole of the bigger identity. So that allowing there to be different kinds of things is one. And addition to that, like, I've always thought that the ethical society models like primary product, primary offering of like, we want more members, we want more people involved, meant like showing up on Sunday mornings. Like, I've already talked about my dislike of committing to going to things on Sunday mornings, but like, I really do like lectures. And I would go to them at different times, especially when they're participatory or like there's a discussion component to them. Like, I can imagine, I like social action committees too. I can imagine a lot of things that I would like to do if the thought was like, the way for people to be involved in these groups was bigger than like making the commitment to show up weekly on Sunday mornings, which I'm super duper not interested in. The last thing I jotted down was that part of the discussion that like Anya said and others said is like, Jay said, is like, we've met great people. We've had the opportunity in our involvement in humanism and ethical culture to connect with individuals here and there. Some of us have been more involved than others, but like, we've met amazing people. We've had great drives, great dinner conversations, great bar talks, and really gotten to open up to people and have them open up to us. And it's felt wonderful. I haven't experienced that in the Sunday morning, in the Sunday platforms. I experience like a very hidebound, very structured, very institutional, very hierarchical. Sorry, I'm bashing you like you're one thing. It's like everywhere, but like it's not as interesting to me to participate in that most of the time. I've seen some good speakers. I've had some good moments, and I've had more fun like cleaning up afterwards and like in the kitchen, like putting away the cookies and things and the coffee, like chatting with people. Like, I've really enjoyed that part more most of the time. And part of that is I don't really like singing with people in the room either, I think. So that's on me. But like, when we talk to the individuals and like individual commitments, like, so a lot of times those commitments are there to be open, to be vulnerable, to share enthusiasm, but the institution is a barrier, and the traditions end up being a barrier that beyond our individual or small group commitments, there's this idea about what humanism requires or what ethical culture requires, or the Sunday platform music should be. And that ends up being a barrier for participation from other kinds of people. It's a barrier to difference. It's a barrier to diversity. It's a barrier to inclusion. It's a barrier to like welcoming environments. And maybe some of this is like thinking about like what humanism or ethical culture really is at its core. Is it platforms? Is it going to platform? When you say we want to grow involvement, what do we want actually that to be? More people on Sundays? Or like members, or more mind share for our humanist ideas and more heart share for our humanist values? Maybe that's something that I think we should consider seriously, is like how the institutions we've built and want to maintain end up being barriers to our movement's actual missions and goals.
And could you imagine if you named yourself Sunday Assembly and locked yourself into Sundays?
Saturday Night Assembly.
I love Sunday Assembly, but I just think like, yeah, there's these little barriers you create. They even put it in their name. God, I want to riff off that. I took this job as the executive director of Atheists United in 2019. And when I took this job, I mean, I'm now one of like, 15 local atheist-ish leaders in the whole country that gets like paid to do this job, not for a national organization. ethical culture making up more than half of them. And I have had this like internal thought about like, okay, how do we bring in new people? How do we have meaningful programming? And the first thing I did is I analyzed all the programming we have. And yeah, a lot of things we've talked about, it's geared towards certain crowds. It's more traditionally intellectual. So I went out and I tried to find church planning books. I literally was just like any resources I could find. And there's almost no good ones out there. They're all just like, have faith in God and you'll have a great congregation. And that sucked. But I did find one or two. And one of the ideas that stuck out the most to me and has transformed how I've organized ever since, and I try to lecture to every community I meet, is this idea that we get stuck on is that we need to like attract and market people because they just want belonging and we just need to give them belonging, right? It's almost just like they're just puzzle pieces that fit. And once we connect them, it's going to work. And this book, at least, and I think my personal experience backs it up, is that that could be a way to get people to the door. But the bigger problem is actually converting them long term, is the hook that keeps you coming back for the rest of your life, not just for another 3 meetings, for another interesting speaker a few months from now, but what gets you committed to give 5% of your income to raise your child there. Then we need to transform people. We need to offer experiences and meaning making that actually helps you grow as a human being. Now, I get that in the 1980s, most of the founders of my community at Atheist United, when they founded Atheist United and the first members that joined it, finding an atheist community was a transformational experience for them. That was it. Like literally just having something where they thought it didn't exist was transformation enough. But for the demographic of people who have mostly secular friends, who are going to secular universities, who are looking at this world and see 100,000 bigger issues than a lot of what is traditionally secular community talk, it's not good enough anymore. You can't say you're a humanist congregation, you get together and have interesting speakers and have me come back every week or every month. It's just not enough. But if I have drug addiction and you help me solve that, you might have me for life. If I am struggling to find a job and you help me find it, you'll have me for life. If you like help me find my identity when I'm struggling, if you help me, like these are the things that we actually need as human beings most of the time. And yeah, we want socials and we want speakers because those are cravings, but like I really think if you don't just want to attract young people, you want to hook young people, which is what we're all asking you to do to us, by the way. We're begging you to like hook us because you've attracted us. We've come, we're here, we're going to keep coming back and talking to you all. But if you want to hook us, just find a way to transform my life. Anya sounds like she kind of got that. She found a community and she's like found her language and values here to the point where she is now president of Humanist International and like is going to be working on this in the rest of her life. For me, it was college. I founded a secular student alliance at California Lutheran University. And I realized creating space for people trying to find community post-religion, most of the people there were post-religion, like was a meaningful way to live my life. And I've like tried to keep recreating that ever since. But a lot of people, it's different. It's simpler. It's like finding their romantic partner or finding a job or like a place that you want to. I really keep coming back to raise your kids, even though I know most of our generation isn't even having kids. But like those are the type of transformations I think you want, because you only have to do that once and you got us. And I like, honestly, we could equally have another conversation about how do we raise money in these spaces and why don't the non-religious give more money? And it's because we're not transforming people. We're just attracting them. We're tickling their needs and wants. And I think we actually need to like say, joining this community, your life will radically improve. You will become a new version of you that you will always love and thank and look back to this community as. Now, a lot of people maybe already have that. They don't fully want that. Okay. They just want to be tickled by the intellectual stuff and they're going to stay individualistic. Okay. Like we're always going to have programming for those, but especially these young people who are like new to your city, who are coming for the first time, like what programming are you offering? We're now trying to start a youth group for high school students because we're realizing how few programs there are for them. Parents are programs, drug and alcohol recovery, recovering from religion has actually taken over most of atheist spaces and probably should have been a sunset program for years. Religious trauma is one of the biggest things, actually, like sucking energy in our communities that needs focused attention. And you can transform people if you address it correctly. But anyways, like most of us have trauma. Most of us need to get politically involved. Most of us are looking for volunteer opportunities. You address all of those, I will give you 10% of my income. I will come for 5 to 10 years. I will bring 100 friends with me. I don't get that from most communities. And I'm trying to figure out how to build it. It's not easy. I don't have the answers. Otherwise I'd be doing it, or I don't know how to do it with, under $1 million. But that's what I really want and what I'm begging for and what I'm challenging you to all curiously explore with us.